Holy guacamole, as our guest would say, I spilled the beans on email marketing with today's guest, and I can't even tell you. So I have my notes next to me. The biggest mistakes made when it comes to email, how consistency 10x the business in 4 months, the 4 biggest mistakes almost everybody makes in email marketing and how not to make them, the secrets to getting higher open rates and click-through rates, and literally the exact process myself and the guest used to write our high-converting emails. We broke down step-by-step her process and my process, and then the non-negotiables when sending emails. Plus, we talk about avocados, turtles, and coffee for an obsessive amount. So I'm going to shut up. It's time to get into the episode. Let's go spill the beans on email and holy guac. Here we go. Cue the intro now. Welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show, where I couldn't be more stoked to have somebody who loves email just as much, if not a little bit more than I do. But email is her 4th favorite thing because she also loves avocados, turtles, and coffee first. But I am joined by one of my dear friends, one of my mastermind family members, somebody who I literally talk email with more than absolutely anybody, and the one person who, when emails me in my inbox, gets me to respond more than anybody, because most of the time I feel like it's a trick. And so today, I know that we're going to unpack everything email, and this is going to be a fun one. So it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur with a business that sells services or products, you're just getting started, you've been doing this forever, you have no email list, or you have a giant one. I guarantee the gold that we're going to unpack today is great. So I just want to welcome to the show my dear friend, the queen of avocados, turtles, and coffee, Ashley. Welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
I'm stoked. It's so easy. It's so easy. I feel like we have so many conversations offline about email, and I was like, I feel like we should bring them online so people can hear all the fun stuff we talk about with email.
Oh my gosh, 100%. My husband was so thankful when we crossed paths. He was like, finally, somebody else that you can talk about email with, because I literally don't even know what you're talking about 95% of the time.
I get that. I totally get that. So before we get started, you listen to the show. You know what the first question is going to be. And so you've probably had prep time, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So when you think back, when you look back in this career and however you got into this career, and you can go in the vein of business or your life or just email in general, when you look back, what's the biggest mistake that you've recognized that you've made? And then what have you carried forward to mitigate it going into the future?
100%. So the biggest thing, because I was thinking about this as well, I think my biggest turning point was I have held myself back so many times because of just uncertainty, that like fear of failure. And I remember trying to decide, like, am I actually going to go fully into email marketing? Is this something that I actually want to do? You know, my very first thought around that was, I don't know who would actually pay me to write emails when there's so many other people who write emails. And so just going through this process of like really kind of just taking those couple steps forward and just being like, all right, I'm just gonna take a baby step in and just doing this. And like now it's turned into like this huge thing where now I'm like, all I do is write emails. Like that's all I do every day is writing emails. And that turning point was so huge for me, because if I wouldn't have just dove head on in and just did the things, I would probably still be like super miserable, working all the things, doing all the things, and just trying to navigate through a business that I absolutely hated at the time.
I love it. Literally one of my favorite movies as a kid was What About Bob? And it was like baby steps, baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. Little psycho in that movie. So I love that. So when you think about that, right? And by the way, for everybody listening, I have Ashley write emails for me, and I have Ashley write emails for all of my clients as well, because her level of humor and connection and comfort that she can take and put words into, like I learn from her as I do this as well. So just to give you props and kudos publicly on the podcast. And so, by the way, for those of you that listen or read our daily newsletter, Ashley is also the one who edits them all to make sure I don't sound like a grammatical nightmare or mess, because like I just start flowing and she makes it make sense once I get it out of me. So when you think about that though, so like summarizing that back is like when you think about a lot of us in our journeys, we sit here and we're like, okay, I feel called to do this thing. Like I want to do this thing, but yet we like stay frozen. Right. And so now You went from, I don't think anyone's going to pay me to write their emails, to literally now all you do is basically send proposals to people to write their emails and then write emails for them all day, every day. And now I'm
Yep.
assuming that it's happening on a different level. Like the wrapping paper might be changed. And so now with that lesson, what are you bumped up against, and where are you navigating that now at this new level to not stagnate, but to just take baby steps and baby steps?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question, because this is something that I feel like it happens in every single turn. Like, yeah, you like accomplish one thing, you check it off, and then you come to the next and you're just like, okay, now what? So for me right now, what it looks like is getting super confident in knowing that I can charge a higher price point, knowing that I can separate myself from the masses, because so often I was blending in with everybody else in terms of with my price point and like the messaging and the copy and things that I was doing. But then my deliverables were just like totally, completely, mind-blowingly different than what everyone else was providing. So for me now, it's like really stepping into that confidence and owning my expertise and really making sure that I share that and not just hide behind like cute little Facebook posts of me and my dog or me and my kid, and really focusing on sharing those results.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too, and just so everybody know, and I know Ashley won't mind, I have a lot of insider information because Ashley and I have been working together like in the mastermind and with email and everything. So I'm going to drive this a little bit because like I've watched you even in the last, like 4 months? Has it been 4 months or so? Go from like, I don't know, to like, I can't handle all the business coming my way. And I'm like Superwoman, hear me roar. And I am like the queen of email, and I'll take the king of relationship email. I'll take that title. And I've watched you do it, and I've looked at you a few times. I'm like, just tighten your seatbelt, like, and enjoy the ride, right? Because it's coming and it's coming. When you look at that, right, now that you think about that, like you love email, right? Just as you probably love email more than I do, because I do a lot more than just email, but email's important to me. But you think about that, you have an increased demand, you're stepping into your confidence, you're doing it all. And you're building this business, and as you're navigating this, like, what do you see as been like the most supportive thing that you've done? Like, as you look at this, you're like, if I could pin down, like, God, every time I did that thing, or I thought that way, or I practiced this, or I leaned in for support, it helped me get to the next level. Like, what's been one of those things? Because literally, like, for those listening, the last 4 months has been, in my opinion, a meteoric rise. Watching you as you've stepped in and put these pieces where you're like, I'm owning this. This is what I do. It's okay to separate myself. And the moment you started doing that, I was like, okay, keep going. Just keep going. And so what have been some of the things that have helped you? Because I think for people listening, we're going to talk about email, but I think a lot of the things that you and I help people with email are directly correlated to the same conversation we're having right now.
Totally, 100%. So I would say, honestly, there's two pieces. I think the number one thing is consistency. And so often I would get bored with being consistent. And I think the biggest thing where I really struggled with was like, okay. So I did the things, but now I want to go do something else because I was getting bored with it. And so that's where I would lean in. And that was like the second piece, is like leaning in to have that support of knowing, no, like, just keep going. Like you just mentioned, like, just keep going. Like, you're totally fine. Like, no, just like stay in your little bubble, stay on your path, and just keep going. Because I was just getting bored with it. And I was like looking for shiny objects and trying to figure it all out. And just being able to lean in and know that, like, hey, like, no, you're doing things like the way you should be. Like, that for me is like super big, because I'm definitely a words of affirmation kind of person. So like, if I get that affirmation that like, no, you're doing great, like, keep going, then I'm like, all right, cool. And I got like another whole like burst of like fire ready to roll into what I'm doing next.
Yeah, so I love it. And so I think watching you too is like, you've always had community around you, but I feel like you've leaned in a lot more to those around you that like kind of hold you accountable, because I think you and I are the same. It's like shiny object, but the distraction becomes the derailment at that point, right? It's the thing that stops it from working, and then it's too late before it's realized, which, by the way, just in that alone, there's like 3 correlating threads for email marketing in general, by the way. So I'm assuming we're going to start unpacking this. But before we do, I just want to give everybody a little bit of a background, because I fell into email marketing by accident, right? Like, it wasn't something that I was like, I'm going to be an email marketer, this is how I'm going to make money. It was, I'm a food blogger, and people asked me to email them recipes when I make them. And so I basically became an email quote unquote marketer through the need dictated by people. But then I fell in love with it, because for me, it's like direct relationship to like the core of my business that are like my best friends. Like I look at email like I'm texting my best friend, you know this, but I want to know like, how did you get here? Like, and when did it start? What got you interested in email? When did you realize it was going to be email? Why do you love email? Give me the whole Ashley story.
Oh my gosh, the whole Ashley story. Okay, so it actually started off when I was 14 years old. I actually self-taught myself through library books how to code websites. I had really big ambitions when I was 14. I was like, I want to become a reporter. I want to write. I want to do the things. And I was like, I need to have a blog. Like that was like my first instinct. I was like, people need to be able to read what I have to say. So I started creating these blogs and doing these things, and they never really went anywhere because I was honestly just like blogging about my teenage self, and like that's not really that interesting. So anyway, so I started doing these blogs, ended up going into college, did the whole corporate life and all of that, and I just found myself like outside of the box all the time. They were like, Ashley, like you are out here, we need you inside of this container. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, like in anything that I did, I excelled at it because I'm, you know, just like doing the things. And they were just like, no, like again, you need to stay within this container. And so what ended up happening is I ended up starting my first web design business, really because I just wanted to be able to actually do what I wanted to do. And so I was building these websites, doing these things for people, and they kept asking me about email marketing. And I was so confused. I was like, why are people sending out emails? And the first thing that I ever correlated email marketing to was Target ads. I was like, why are people sending out Target ads? Like, why? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I started snooping around as I was like inputting their forums, seeing what people were doing. And I kept hearing about it and hearing about it and hearing about it. I'm like, what is this whole thing about? So I ended up really kind of diving in. I totally sucked at it for like the good first year or two in my business. I was super inconsistent. I just kind of sent out emails when I just like felt like it. And I like totally flopped at everything. Like I feel like I've made all the mistakes with email marketing before I decided to go into it, which was kind of like my turning point. I was super tired of doing web design. It wasn't something that I was super passionate about anymore. I basically like that passion just totally ran dry for me. And then I kind of was like, man, I really like writing emails. Like I love to write. And I wasn't really into the blogging thing because I was like, well, there's a lot of technical things, blogs, and you know this by all means, like there's so many different pieces to it. And I was like, but with email, it's so simple. Like, and it was just one of those things where I was just like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense for me to be able to just like sit and write emails as if I'm just talking to my best friend. I know you correlate it with texting, and it's like the same process, right? And so what ended up happening is I came again to that breaking point because I was like basically doing all the things. I was a tech VA for some people. I was, you know, a blog writer, even though I absolutely hated it. Like I basically did everything to be able to fill my plate. And I was working like 60-hour work week with a baby. I didn't take a maternity leave. Like I'm talking like super drastic stuff just to keep my business afloat because I believed in it so incredibly much. And it wasn't until I actually got into email where I was able to then kind of free myself from a business that I absolutely kind of hated, but also loved at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so powerful. And like, it's really interesting being on this seat because like, hey, by the way, guys, here's the secret to community and coaching and helping each other. The person in it, Ashley, is the star. We just help navigate pieces a little bit. But I even remember like we got on a call and you're like, I have to choose between this and this. I'm like, don't you dare choose. And then 4 months later, you're like, oh, by the way, it's like 25x different and I'm ready to come in now. And a lot of it came down to focus and consistency and you really trusting yourself and being like, wow, I might not quote unquote have the confidence on paper, but I'm clear that this is what I want to do. And if I keep doing it, I'm going to get it done and it's going to work. And I loved it. And I've loved being a part of it. Like it's kind of fun to just watch and read your emails and have you on the team and everybody we do. But you said something that I'm kind of jealous of. You said you got to learn all the mistakes of email marketing before you got good at it. And I had to go the other way. I got really good at email marketing from the get-go because all I did was send content out. I wasn't selling. And so no matter what, I was already just talking. But then the moment I took it from I can do it for myself to I have to do it for other people. And I went from having an email list. And my list was big at the time. It was like 175,000 to emailing a 3 million person list, an 11 million person list with sales and millions of dollars tied to it. I feel like I learned the mistakes the hard way because I sent emails to 1.4 million people with a broken link on it they couldn't buy. And, things like that back in the day. So I get a little bit jealous, but I want to transition into email now because I know you and I are going to geek out about email. When you think about email, and I just alluded to the mistakes that we made, I would love to hear from your perspective. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when it comes to, and we'll keep it in the container of quote unquote email marketing. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see?
Yeah, okay. So I think the number one thing that people do is they make it super complicated. They allow the funnels or the tech or the kind of idea or concept of like, oh, I need all of these things in order for it to work, when in reality, it can literally just be as simple as sending an email broadcast out and just communicating with your people. So I think that's the first piece of it. But then on the flip side, I also think as well, too, that a lot of times when it comes to email marketing, so often we just really get into the, how do I say it? In terms of what we're saying, right? Like, I feel like when people are going through the process of actually writing the email, right? Like, you get over the fear of writing the email, which is like the first thing, but then you actually get into like the Google Doc and you're starting to write the email and you're just like, what am I supposed to say? We often just copy and paste like a blog post and throw it in. Or I see a lot of people, and I get this all the time, where I'll like see a sales email and I'll literally see the sales page just literally copied and pasted over from the actual like sales page to the email. Yeah. I'm like, what the heck, guys? Like, what are we doing? So I think the biggest thing is that so often we like try to repurpose email and make it super easy and simple, but then we kind of lose the fact that like we are trying to make an actual connection point with somebody, and it comes from having a style in terms with your email and really making sure that you're writing in a way that's more conversational and not just like throwing something at somebody and giving what you're actually sending them.
Yeah, so I want to summarize that because I heard two things. Number one is I heard overcomplicated, which I totally agree with, right? And then the second one is trying to take like a transactional approach and have it be robotic, but then expect it to work, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
100%.
Here's one that I'm going to throw on because like this is going to be one of those episodes because you and I are email geekies. The other one I see is that people try to accomplish what should be done over 7 days in one email. And so I call it email stuffing, right? Like I named it that in an intensive the other day. Someone's like, well, I'm like, stop email stuffing. And they're like, what's email stuffing? I'm like, I just made it up on the spot. But let me tell you what email stuffing is. And for those listening, we can make this a hashtag, do whatever you want with it. But email stuffing is I look at it and I have a rule, and you know this better than anybody. I have a rule that like you get one thing per email. One.
Yes.
One. And so like I've watched people literally try to get people to go from I'm happy in my life to thinking my life is broken, wanting to invest money in it for something I don't need, and then convincing me to do it all in one email. And I was like, what are you doing? Stop. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make with email today is they lack patience. They lack patience. And we live in this society and we live in this world where everything is like dopamine, like on the spot. Give me the dopamine, like immediate gratification. But I will tell you right now, the success of your email is patience.
Seriously.
Immediate 100%. Gratification. And so I'll summarize this mistake because we have 4 of them for you so far. Overcomplicated, trying to be transactional, trying to email stuff, right? And then lacking patience, because I'm going to tell you right now, you will have 0 results from an immediate gratification email. 0. And anybody who tells me differently, you can't have a list that you haven't emailed in 4 months and send a sales email, and just because you made a couple sales think that that's gratification because you just burnt all those relationships. Like emails that work come as a byproduct of the prerequisite touch points, of the touch points leading up to it, the emails, the context, the container that they've been in. So I think that's good. We got 2 mistakes from you. We got 2 mistakes from me. I think, are those 4, or are we missing any other glaringly big ones?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I want to touch on something that you've talked on before.
Yeah.
And that is your open and click rate.
Oh,
and this is something that like I actually posted about today. And I post about it occasionally just to remind people because nobody talks about this. And that is your like open and click rate is all about the relationship you have with your subscriber. I get so many people reaching out and asking me, Ashley, like how can I make my better. And they're like, here, give me some actual like tactical strategy. And like, they never really like my answer of like, well, like, it's your relationship with them. Like, people click on my emails because they're like, I like Ashley Deluca, right? And the subject line, I guess, you know, it does weigh a little bit. Like, obviously, like, a super sucky subject line isn't going to help anybody here. But realistically, like, email marketing is really about that relationship. And that also comes with patience. Like, it's just like if you, like with your best friend, like, if you don't keep in touch with your best friend, like, of course they're going to be like, what the heck, man? Like, what happened, right? Mm-hmm. But your email subscriber, like, you have to treat them in just the same manner with those consistent touch points. And also, too, making sure that you focus on, like, actually being there. Like,
totally. Yeah, I want to expand on this deeper because I think you hit a point. And here's one of the other ones. Here's a secret to email marketing. I don't think I've ever publicly talked about this, ever. But you threaded into it. So, I mean, you've heard it because of our mastermind calls. But the secret of email marketing, normally, the big secret comes down to the depth of organic engagement you have with your audience. Screw it. Here we go. Cards on the table. Ashley knows me. I disclose everything to my mastermind members, but I'll tell it to you guys listening. Like, I was just in an intensive, right? And these people are a big company. And so email is a massive driver. Like, I'm talking multiple 6 figures of revenue a month just from email marketing. Like, multiple, right? And so I look at this and there's so much opportunity, right? And I'm like, I bet you we can get a 25% lift in the business with email. And they're like, okay, cool. And so they look for the strategies and tactics. And the first place I went was organic social. Yeah. The first place I went was organic social. And they're like, I thought we were talking about email. I'm like, we are talking about email. We're talking about social triggers. We're talking about brand awareness. We're talking about front of mind, because you have to remember that there is a symbiotic relationship between your email and every other touch point in your business. And so if you have social and you're not using it, guess what? That is going to negatively affect your email. If you're running paid traffic and you're not responding to the ads, or the things are getting slammed on the ads and your team's not in there and you're not running good content, that's going to affect your email. Everything works together. Now, can you have email be successful independent of those? Yes, but unless you're just doing email, all of those things matter. And so literally when we think about open and click-through rates, I'll hit the subject line for you too. I'm going to hit this because it's important, because we've talked about this. I actually sent you this study from Litmus. But the thing is that you have to remember with subject lines and emails that it's a relationship, right? And Ashley hit this, and we're going to hit this again. But the success of your email comes down to the success of the relationship that you have with that family member on the other side, that email subscriber, right? And so do shady subject lines work? No. They get somebody's attention through the bait and switch, but the moment the email doesn't match, you've trained them to not trust you. So the next emails won't be opened. Literally, they have studied this in billions and billions and billions of emails, and the best converting subject lines are the ones that are straightforward and to the point. And so the success of your open rates comes down to your pre-existing relationship with your customer. The moment they open their inbox and they see the from name, the feeling that they get in their body is what dictates whether they open that email, because that's what dictates of whether they even read the subject line or not. Then they go to the subject line, and then when they click on the subject line and they open it, if that subject line does not match what's in the email, you've lost them. But if it does, you just added another touch point of trust and safety, which that, before we even get to the content in the email, is the determining factor of whether they ever open your next email or not. And so when we think about this, email is the perfect example of a relationship gone right or gone wrong. And I've been able to look at businesses and tell the success of the company based on their email stats. Like, literally just based on how many replies they get, what their open rates are, and what their click-through rates are. And like, here's another one. If your click-through rates suck, or if your click-through rate is low, right, you have to ask yourself, like, what was missing and what's there? Or if your open rate sucks, what I see people do, this is my favorite one. My open rate sucks. I'm going to go rewrite the email. I'm like, they didn't open it.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, wait, they didn't open it. And they're like, yeah. So I'm like, why would you change the email? They didn't even see what was inside the wrapping paper yet. The present, you need to change the wrapping paper. And I was like, okay, cool. But then the next thing, they'll try to write a hooky subject line. And I'm like, wait, I'll go to the 3 previous emails. And in those emails, I will be able to tell in a moment's notice why that email wasn't opened. And so, like, newsflash, The success of your email marketing isn't some crazy strategy or tactic. It comes down to the relationship. And if you look at the quote unquote container, the word that we use, the container that surrounds that email, and then what context got them into that list in the first place, you can typically find all the quote unquote secrets. There you go.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And I think it really comes back to that ecosystem
Yeah.
in terms of with all the different pieces of the puzzle and as they come together. And this is why, you know, as I'm like bringing in clients and intaking them, like I do look at your guys' social media. Like it's so incredibly important to be able to look at the other pieces of your business, not only so I can understand and help drive traffic to them, but on the flip side, that also tells me, okay, like what else are you going on in your world? Like, are you consistently posting in your Facebook group, or are you leaving your like favorite peeps high and dry? Like it's really so incredibly important to make sure that you're focused on not just email, but then also showing up for your other people as well too, because they're seeing you in both places.
Yeah. No, I love it. And so I think, like, I don't know, can you think of any other mistakes? I think that hits a lot of the big ones.
Yeah, those are definitely 100% the big ones in terms of with what I see and what I talk about most.
Yeah, and then so like to shift it over a little bit to like best practice, because what happens with you and I is people get to us all the time. They're like, give me the strategy, give me the tactic. And my typical first response, because I'm a smart ass, is I can't love your kids for you. Yeah. Right? Like the thing is like you got to start with what. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And what I found is most of the time people don't even have the what. They're like, oh, I'm sending an email. I'm like, no, what's the what? I don't fucking care you're sending an email. That's not the what. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Sending an email is a tool. And so I think like to shift it over a little bit, and I would love your thoughts on that. Like when you look at these things, like what are some of the best things that people can keep in their mind, like to get their email successful regardless of the content that goes on the inside of it? Like what are some of the things that you think through? I have my own list that I'll give you, but I want to hear yours first.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so the first thing that came into my mind, and this might be a little bit off here.
No, but I got it.
Like clarity is so incredibly important, because especially if you're going into your email, like even before you hit that Google Doc, if you are not clear on, you know, what your message is, like in terms of with like, what is your purpose in this world? Like, what are you trying to share? What is your like main center focus in terms of with who you're trying to serve and what you're trying to do? But then also too, like having that confidence within yourself to like own your expertise as well. Like this is something that, you know, for me, like I know I've struggled with as well too. And like, it does show even before I go to write my content. Like if you look at my emails, which I mean, I'll be more than happy to share, like from like when I first started, I was so passive in terms of with my tone and what I was talking about, and kind of like, you know, like, I don't think I actually said this, but like in the same concept of like, if you want to click here, here's the link. Now I'm like, click here, do this, do that. Let's go forward. So I think that's really important, is like having that clarity. But I think also too, on the other side as well, I think it's really about just like having that focus, right? Mm-hmm. Like I feel like so often, like kind of going back as well, when you're talking about like having that one center focus, is like before you sit down, like you need to understand your focus of like, what is the next step? Sometimes it's easier for me to write backwards in terms of with what is the call to action? Like, where do I want to lead them? And like kind of moving through like, all right, so the call to action is I want them to go to my Instagram page. Okay, so what story do I need to tell? What does this need to look like? And just working through that process of like moving them through that, and it makes it so much easier as well.
Yeah, and I think like I love visual analogies and all of it. I love that, and that's the best way to do mostly anything in business. We teach it in Lean Six Sigma. We do this with process management. It's like you have to start with the end result in mind, and in this case, it's like not only where, but it's like, what do I want my subscriber, my email family member to accomplish? And you might be like, I want them to get to my Instagram, right? But you might then work backwards and realize that they might have to do 3 things before they get to your Instagram. And so instead of shoving that in one email, you then look at it and you're like, oh, that's 3. Got it. I can do email 1, email 2, and email 3, which increases the touch point, sets them up to win. And the most important thing I heard you say is speaking with conviction, right? Which comes from clarity. And I'd say that one of the biggest secrets to email marketing being successful is to be direct. And in order to be direct, you have to be clear. And in order to be clear, you have to have done the work and know where it is you're going to take people, which comes back to that inner confidence. And whether that's confidence for you or confidence for you and your team collectively, or your team empowered at that lower level. But, you know, I think with all of it, like I would never send a text to my friend like, hey, I have something to share, but I don't know what to share. So I'm just sending you this text to start a conversation about what I might share. And they're going to be like, I'm deleting your number. Like, what are you doing to me? And so I think with what you said, it's really, really important. And, you know, I think, like, what are your thoughts on this, right? So, like, I would just love to know, because, like, I very rarely, and I mean very rarely, come into an instance where I can send one email and have it accomplish the goal that's put on the table. I literally have looked back, because obviously I do this every day. I've looked back, and there is not one time in the last 3 years that I've been able to accomplish anything for a client in less than 3 emails. Less than. Even if it's 3 broadcasts. Like, I can't think of one. I mean, it would all have to depend on this, like, context. Like, maybe if they were sending a broadcast a day already and they were value-based, then I could technically help them, you know, change the destination and get them there. But most of the time I found that it's required this, like you said, this level of thinking to go from the end state and work backwards. And if I'm really leading people and guiding people, I've had to do it in multiple emails. What about you? Like, what have you noticed with that?
Yeah, no, I definitely have felt the same way. You know, so often I've had people who are like, I just want you to write this one email for me. And I'm like, listen, this one email is going to not totally work. It doesn't matter what I put into it. I could pour all the gold, all the heart, all the value into just you, and it's not going to do what it is that you want. So that's why I always do things in bundles of 3, 5, and 8, because usually depending on where someone's wanting to go, like a minimum of 3 emails is going to get somebody there.
You know what's funny? You know what's so funny about this? We did not talk about this at all, but Ashley and I do a lot of the same things. I do strategy. She comes in and writes them. Yeah. I only plan my bundles in 3, 5, and 8. Every sequence that I write. Literally, no joke. Because I was just with a client, and I was doing some emails, and you read some of them today, and it was 3. And then literally one of them, I was like, I look at a product, whether it's a digital product or a physical product, and I'm like, I can write the fulfillment sequences most of the time in 5, unless it's a multiple ingredient product, and then it's 8. And it's every time it ends up naturally at 3, 5, and 8, which is hilarious.
Yeah, it does. Like, it doesn't matter how I like look at it or what is in front of me. It's always 3, 5, and 8, unless I'm doing weekly emails. Then usually those are 4. But other than that, all sequences are 3, 5, and 8. Yeah.
So if you're not hearing this, one of the big secrets to email working is to have a plan. It's to have a plan. And I look back at my email marketing journey, right? And I used to make, like, I remember it was 2014, and I sent my first ever affiliate email, and I made $110,000 with one email. It was mind-blowing. And I was selling a digital bundle. Do you remember when they used to do the ebook bundles?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I put my product in one of them, so naturally I mailed for it, right? And no one had done bundles back then, so it was like $67. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. But the problem was that I got away with it that first time. And so a year later, when it happened again, I sent one, and it went from 110 to like 14, and then a year later it was like $1,000. Because at that point, I never really knew, and so I learned, like, because I was inconsistent, right? I would like send a broadcast and I posted a new recipe instead of being like, I'm going to email on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday consistently, whether I have a recipe or not, right? I'm going to build a relationship. I'm going to build consistency. And for those of you listening to this, I'm giving you so many email secrets underneath what I'm saying. You might want to listen to it again. I'm not directly telling you, but I'm kind of directly telling you. You know, what to do. And so now when you think about this, because we talked about working backwards, right? And I would love your process in this, because I think you and I go about emails differently to get to the same result. But like, when you think about that end state in mind, what do you typically do? You're like, I need them to accomplish this, and then this is the story I tell. Do you outline it? Do you whiteboard it? Like, how do you go about, like, what's your process?
Okay, so I am a huge outliner. So a lot of times it's either outlining it into a notebook or I outline it into a Google Doc. And so my plan is to get a huge whiteboard, but I'm super scared my child is going to run off with it and it's just going to become a doodle board. So I may have to get to I start with outlining. And a lot of what I do is really based off of Ashley Mae Fernandez like story. And her content posts and things like that, and kind of taking that with that in mind and kind of making it in my way of like my recipe of an email.
Got it.
So my thought process is always kind of focusing on, okay, so if somebody is interested in, let's like use the mastermind for an example. So like if somebody's interested in the mastermind, what are the thoughts and beliefs that they need to like have shift in order to be able to be like, heck yeah, like I'm totally into the mastermind. So like, for me, I would think about myself first. And so a lot of times when I'm doing like my clients' emails, sometimes I do think about myself in terms of, okay, what has held me back in the past? And so I look at, okay, so one of my biggest fears was, okay, wait a second, like, am I like ready for this? Like, is this like, am I like, okay, like, can I sit at this table? Like, am I ready for that? And so like, that right there is like a total an email where I would talk about, and maybe, because like it would be underneath your name, for an example, like I would actually kind of outline it and be like, hey, like my student actually, like she felt XYZ way, this is what she was going through. Or you could even use your self example. Maybe that's like something you felt, and like being able to take that and put it into a story where they're like, holy guac, like, yeah, like you are speaking my language, and then moving into the call to action makes it really easy for you then to be able to kind of outline that thought process. Because it's probably not just stopping there in terms of, okay, next the table, what's next? And so basically just kind of breaking it down where you're taking care of those objections before you get to the sales, to the pitch, to the point where like when you send them that message, like, hey, it's open, let's do the things, they're already sold. They're already there. They're already sold because you've already given them the value. You've already given them the consistency of showing up, saying, hey, I'm consistently showing up in your inbox. Like I'm consistently showing up in my Facebook group. I'm consistently doing the things. And I'll just kind of pivot here for a second. Like that was one of my biggest selling points for the mastermind, is because I saw George consistently showing up on his podcast 3 times a week, which I thought was crazy. I only do 1 because I was like, holy God, like that's a lot of talking. But like consistently showing up in the Facebook group, consistently doing like calls where I could like eavesdrop and come on in and do the things. Like that's where I got hooked. That is where I got hooked in terms of factor. So if you can do that in your email marketing, you're showing up. And that is so much more than so many other coaches, strategists, people's at whatever you do, honestly, are doing. Most people are so lazy that they don't stick up and like be consistent and do what they say they're going to do. So if you can do that within your email marketing, that's the thing. That's where I would go.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, I love it. I'm gonna give mine too. And you said a lot to unpack, right? You in all the best ways. Like literally what I have found, it's not the best content that wins, it's the person who's the most consistent. Every time, right? Yeah. Because what we're willing to trade the present on the inside of the box for something that might not be as shiny in order to feel safe to have it. And consistency creates safety. And if everybody listening to this hasn't realized that every single buying decision, purchasing decision, enrolling decision is emotionally based, and the one emotion that people want is safety, right? Because what's the one emotion that comes after buying is buyer's remorse, right? And regret and guilt, right? And so we're pre-handling that, right? And so what I heard you say, and I'm going to give my process, is you think about, what's the end state? We use my mastermind, for example, right? And by the way, if you guys want in, let us know. Ashley and I, hit us up. We would love to have you in the family. And by the way, our mastermind is a family. It is not the George Show. It is we work together every day for everybody to win. But when we think about it, it's like we want somebody in the mastermind. That's the goal, right? And so you break down like, I want them into the mastermind. You're like, okay, what would be preventing them from getting into the mastermind? Okay, what stories would I have to tell to help them feel understood or seen, heard, or respected? And then when you look at that, you probably break it down like, this is going to need to be 5 emails because look, it's like intro, belief 1, story 1, shift 1, join, right? And that's kind of what I do. So here's what I do, just so everybody's listening. People ask me this all the time. And like Ashley said, this doesn't matter if you're having physical products, digital products, service-based, coaching. It does not matter. But I'm going to tell you right now, the secret to your success is consistency. Like you've never lost weight by inconsistently working out. You've never gained muscle by inconsistently working out. You've never nurtured a relationship by inconsistently showing up. Like consistency is one of the secrets to success. And email marketing is your literally keel in the water, because every day you have the opportunity to literally be consistent with a touch point. And so that's how I view it. And by the way, Ashley has seen our daily newsletter open rates. I send an email a day and we did it for 90 days and we're averaging an open rate of 88% across 90 emails. And when I do put a click in, we're getting 40 to 80%. And we're getting ready to do another season of them. I had to break them up into seasons. And so we're getting ready to do another season. But really, each email takes probably, 30 seconds to read every day. And they add value and they're consistent. And so they're there. So there's a lot in there. But what I do is I look at that and you're like, hey, like let's say it's your mastermind or we're selling your email program or selling your product, right? You come to me and you're like, hey, this is what I want them to do. I'm like, cool. And so then I ask you, I'm like, hey, what are all the things they need to know in order to be successful? And then I write each thing on one sticky note. So each sticky note, and I keep sticky notes around me like crazy. I do it physically as well. And so I literally will write on the sticky note, like, oh, the mistakes people make. And then I'm like, okay, next sticky. The benefits that they feel. Okay, next sticky. Oh, how to use the product. Okay, next sticky. What it looks like. Next sticky. And then I literally lay them out on a board in front of me. And I was like, anything missing? And they're like, no. I'm like, are you going to tell them you're dating them? And they're like, oh. And they're like, intro. I'm like, yeah, you got to set context. Right? And then I was like, I put that up. And then like, there's always a sale email on there, right? And I was like, yeah, but what about the people that don't buy? And they're like, oh, shit. I'm like, we got to solve there too. And then it's like a wrap email, right? And then what you end up with is normally 3, 5, or 8. And my big one's longer. It depends. But just so you guys know, it also depends on the price point, the sales mechanism, where they are. And that's we cover that in our email training, which Ashley's been through, by the way, and she loves it. As I speak for you, I'll let you tell everybody about it in a minute. And so what I do is I literally physically put a sticky, and then I was like, and I don't know your audience like you know your audience, right? I'm like, but you're typically your avatar. I'm like, hey, what order makes the best sense? And they're like, oh, well, I'm like, well, can they know how to use it? Well, will they want to know how to use it if they don't know the benefits? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, so let's swap those, right? And I literally, on a whiteboard with sticky notes or on the wall or windows, you should see hotel rooms when I stay in them with my team. There's 300, 400 sticky notes on a window in a hotel room. And I'll map them out and then I'll order them. And then they're like, all right. And then I turn that into an outline. And so then I look at it and in the outline, I put intro and I'm like, what's the one thing that I need them to take away from this? And what's the one call to action? And that becomes my outline, right? And so then it's like one thing, one call to action all the way down. And then I go back and then I'm like, what's the story? Or what's the hook, or what's the belief, or what's the 3 things? Then I add those. And then all of a sudden the emails are written. You're just adding padding.
Yeah. 100%.
Right? Like you're adding personality at that point. So, hey, there's the secret. And that's why I help people anyways, because you're going to be like, what? Don't worry, you'll see it. But that's kind of how I get there, right? It's all in a journey, all of it. And I think the biggest thing with email is remembering that it is a journey. It's a journey that takes time, and it's okay because and if I asked, and I'd ask anybody listening, I'd ask you, like, would you ever want somebody to sign up for your email list and only stay on it for a day? Then don't write emails that only solve for a day.
Exactly.
Right? And so, like, this is a very, very different game. And, like, I just walked into a company at a very high level doing $12 million a year. And the problem is they've been going down month over month because they're feeling the pain of only sending sales emails from 6 months ago. Because the amount of time it takes to have that realized in revenue gets to a point where you can't get it back for another 12 months. It's like when you break up in a relationship, they're like, oh, it takes like a year for every month you're together. I was like, well, if it took 6 months for it to go down, it's going to take 2 times that to get back up because you're going to get from negative to neutral and then neutral back up. And so I think that's it. So I think that covers your process, my process, and that's kind of how I think about it. Now, when you think about email, and now we know your process, we know the mistakes that people make, right? Like, what are some of the best practices that, like, you think are, like, non-negotiables people should carry forward, they should have in their front of their mind? Like, I should never send an email unless I thought about this, or I should never, hit schedule until I checked this. Like, what are those non-negotiables for you that you see people commonly make mistakes?
Okay, so oh my gosh, yes. So we covered a lot of them already. And let me tell you what, I wish I had this podcast episode when I first started doing email marketing, because this would seriously cut to the chase so much faster than anything else like I have ever studied or learned or any of the things. So I would say the first piece of this is definitely making sure, obviously, that it flows, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of with the bottom, the middle, and the whole thing. A lot of times what I see is that, people will have a story or they'll add something in that's, quote unquote, value based, but then it doesn't match the call to action whatsoever. It's like super random. It's super like off the cuff. It doesn't make any sense. It's not enticing. So you want to make sure that like your whole email flows on through to the point where like they're already finding that link. They're already looking to click on it even before they get to that point when their like eyes are going through. So I think that's but then like Formatting is so incredibly important, especially in terms of with cell phones. Like that's a huge thing. Like so many people are viewing their emails from their cell phones. And so a lot of times, you have all this crazy pictures and GIFs. And don't get me wrong, I love GIFs just like anybody else. I love making them. It's like a side passion of mine, of me and my kiddo. But like what ends up happening is we have all these different pieces that we're trying to put together in an email, and it gets very confusing very quickly, especially when you have tons of pictures and formatting thing. And guys, just keep it super simple. Like just make it super simple to the point where it just looks like an email that you literally just typed up and sent on over to somebody. So those are like two pieces that I always kind of look out for, and just make sure that like, okay, does this make sense? That's usually the biggest thing. But then also too, making sure that like the formatting's on point, that everything is good to go. Nothing looks wonky. Everything works. Holy guac. Yes. Oh my God. Like making sure the links work. That's so big. And just making sure that also too, you're sending it out to the right segment of your audience as well.
Yeah. Which leads me to a couple of questions, right? How often do you actually send an email to the entire list?
Oh boy. Not often.
I'd say I probably only send an email to the entire list 2% of the time.
Yeah, it's not very often at all.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to see kind of where you were as well, because I want everybody listening to this to pick up on what was just said without saying it. Like, I literally only send to the whole list less than 2%. It's probably even less than that if I really looked at it, and Ashley is the same way independently. Yeah. So I want you to hear that, because personalization and segmentation is one of the keys here. And you said another thing in like, what are the best practices that I think is important to understand. I'm not going to cover it here, but I cover it inside the Eternal Flame Method training, the email course that we have. But what you have to understand about email is that you're being graded at every turn. There's 3 basically reporting agencies that are like credit bureaus, right?
Yeah.
For email.
Yeah.
And so your IP, your own CR, like your ESP that you're on has a reputation score for your account and your IP with them, everything you're from, all of it. Like it's there. And what I can't understand with people is how many times they knowingly put themselves into spam boxes and then get pissed that they end up in spam. And so you said it earlier when checking the emails, keeping it simple. One of the reasons I say one location and one destination is because anything more triggers spam. But this happened the other day. I helped a company write their emails and I love them. And then they added a header and footer and they added 21 links to the email. 21 links to the email, right? Because every header menu linked, the footer menu had Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Here's a news flash. If they're reading your email, they want to be in your fucking inbox. Stop trying to send them to Facebook. Stop trying to send them to Instagram unless you're sending them a dedicated email to that place for that reason on purpose. And so you said like, make sure you check your links and make sure they work. I'd say make sure you only have one. And you keep it that way. And it goes all the way back to one of the mistakes in the beginning that we talked about is that everybody overcomplicates this, right? Yeah. And there's an episode coming out that came out before this with my friend Bethany, and you're going to see her emails. She is the only, and literally I've been doing this for 11 years now. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies, billions and billions and billions of emails. And she is the first person that I can confidently say I support sending image-based emails. Out of every single company, she is the only one, and I mean the big ones, that I have agreed and been like, I think it's a smart move for you to send visual-based emails compared to everybody else. So when you say keep it simple, text, make it simple. You have to remember that you're conditioning a habit or a behavior when somebody's reading your email. I'm giving so much away on this podcast. It's mind-blowing to me. I get fired up about email. Like, it's my thing. 100%. Oh, my God. But you're conditioning something. So you have to imagine, like, hey, when you get somebody to read your email, are you trying to steal their attention, or are you trying to get them one step closer? And so you can put GIFs and images and blah, 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 and you literally just became a distraction from their results. And so every time they see your email, I'm like, oh, every time I see their email, there's pretty images. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. And then you're conditioning that behavior. Or every time they open an email and it's 87 fucking pages long, they're like, I can never read this email again. And I was like, when was the last time we opened an email on our phone, saw that it was 8 scrolls, and like, yeah, I'm going to read this? No, like, that's what I have a Kindle for, not my inbox, right? Yeah. And so that needs to be like a hook of like how treating your emails like a Kindle will put you out of business.
100%.
That's a good subject line, by the way. But then like you have to understand this. And so like get to the point, be direct, be confident, understand that you're allowed into somebody's home. Like, in my opinion, the inbox is a home. It's like having somebody's phone number in business, because like it's the only thing. I'm not competing against an algorithm. I'm just competing against your attention. And so if I want to keep it, I got to go deep there, and I have to protect it. And like the way that I look at it is like, if I can condition you in a good way, that every time you read my email, it takes less than 10 seconds to know what it's about, and you get a feeling associated with it in a very clear path. There's 0 ways to lose that game. 0.
100%.
And so you said a few things that trigger that, so I had to like diarrhea it out on the podcast. And I know this is about you and talking and interviewing you, but that one got me all fired up. So
no, seriously, I absolutely love this conversation.
What's your favorite rant about email? Like, what do you love ranting about with more than anything when it comes to email?
Oh, gosh, I feel like I could definitely rant on all the things, but I think the biggest thing is definitely just of all these funnels. I worked with one particular client who literally had like more funnels than I knew what to do with. And it was upsell this, downsell this. And it was such a cobwebbed mess of like, where does somebody go and where do they end up? And I feel like this is very much so a mentality that we've picked up with like this new like funnel world, is that like, oh my gosh, we have to have this upsell to do this downsell and go here and do this. And then, you know, you try to create email sequences off of this because you know that like, okay, I need to have fulfillment. I want to move them. I want to do what George is saying. But then you get so overwhelmed because you have so many different things that it's just like, wait a second, come on, let's get back to the basics. Like, just focus on like what you really want to sell and stop trying to take people on an endless like clicking buying journey that actually doesn't serve them or you in the long run.
Totally. And you can't scale a complicated business or a complicated offer or get any data or anything like that. And one of these days I'm going to accept the fact that I always just tell people where to find you at the end of the show, because I have a note to tell people in the beginning of the show and I always forget because I get so wrapped up in the conversation. And so just for everybody wondering and listening right now, Ashley's in my world everywhere. She's in our Facebook group. She's in our mastermind. She's now on the podcast. You will find her all in the world. But when people want more avocados, turtles, and coffee, what is your website and where can they find you?
Yeah, 100%. So you can find me in all the places over at ashleykdeluca.com.
Sweet. Now that we have that out of the way, I'll say it like 25 more times, but it's ashley.k.deluca, DELUCA.com. And it's Ashley, ASHLEYK, and then deluca.com. And we'll have it in the show notes and everything. So what's the current book you're reading?
Oh my gosh. So I have been trying to trudge through, but have been doing very good of reading Clockwork. Clockwork has been so good. It's one of those things where like my toddler has been like sitting with me and like wanting to steal my iPad to go watch Bubble Guppies. And I'm like, no, it's mom's reading time. Like, give me a break here. It's been so good. I absolutely love it.
So current read Clockwork, which I recommend for everybody. I gave Ashley a list. I was like, read these in this order for your business.
Yes.
And so she's crushing. Absolute favorite food.
Oh my gosh. Let's see. I have Chipotle sitting here, but that's only because my husband works there. Not that, definitely. Frosted animal crackers with the sprinkle.
Just so everybody knows, this was one of my favorite questions. So I ask everybody when they join the mastermind, on the last survey question, I asked them like, what is your all-time favorite food? And Ashley put in frosted animal crackers, and I legitimately spit my coffee out when I read it because it comes to my inbox, right? And so she fills it out, and I'm reading it, and I was like, you would. And it made so much sense, and I loved it so much. It made my heart absolutely happy. And so if you could give people one thing to remember when it comes to email right now, like if you literally had a tattoo gun in your hand and you could tattoo it on their brain and they would remember it every day for the rest of their business life and career when it comes to email marketing, what is the one thing that you would want people to take away and remember no matter what?
Oh my gosh, just keep it simple. Like literally, I think the biggest thing is that even for me within my business, I have let that fear hold me back in so many different ways. Just send the email. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be in any which way. Like if I would have never started sending those emails back in, gosh, 2017 that were super crappy and terrible and awful, I would have never come to this point where I'm now writing awesome emails.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that you just go email is like your key to just moving forward and getting out of your own way.
Yeah, I love it. And listen, with email, it's supposed to be simple. And Ashley just said a few things in that answer that gave you more answers. Transparency always wins. Authenticity wins. Being human always wins. Email is just a relationship with people, and it's how you practice it and do it. And so for those of you listening right now, and Ashley will vouch for this, I did a on-demand training on this, literally like 3 principles to put into practice right away for this and email. And the training is free. It leads into our email course, the Eternal Flame Method, which I highly recommend that every one of you get. But if you want to watch the on-demand training, go to theeternalflamemethod.com, and then eternal, because email is the flame that runs forever in your business. Some, analogies and metaphors here. But theeternalflamemethod.com, and you can watch the on-demand training. Just jump in, register, and do it. Okay, cool. So, God, we covered a lot. We covered mistakes. We covered consistency, mistakes. We covered the secrets to getting higher open rates and click-through rates. We covered the exact process we use to write highly converting emails, non-negotiables when sending emails. What did we miss, Ashley DeLuca? What did we miss?
Okay, I want to talk about the course really quick. I got to say something.
Okay.
So here's the thing. When I was learning email marketing, I basically self-taught myself up to the point of meeting George. George is like the only other person where I felt like, holy guacamole, this dude like gets my brain. There were so many things that I was like thinking, but wasn't really sure and kind of on the edge about. And he was like, no, just do this. And I was like, okay, cool. We're going to just do the things. So this email course has literally been so transformational within not just the work that I do, but for the work that I do for my clients and all the things, because like literally like there's so many things I was like, oh, I never thought about that. But then it also gets my mind turning in terms of like, oh, well, what about this? And then it's so cool to be able to jump back and forth and like add to it, because you're always adding to the course as well, and making sure that it's updated with like the newest stuff. So I just had to throw that out there, because like anytime people are like, how do I learn about email marketing? I was like, well, you can learn me, like you can hear me talk about it. But then like if you just go to George, like George has like the master of the things. And this is who I learned from. And it's been so cool to allow people to be able to just get like that direct access of information so easily through your course.
Yeah. And by the way, I did, thank you. I'm blushing a little bit. I didn't ask her to do that. She's not even an affiliate. Like we just work together. She actually pays me to say that. I'll just be really frank. I love it because she's in the mastermind and she has the course, and I'm interviewing her in, and we work together, by the way, just so everybody listening, like, I think email's a team effort as well. And I love writing email. I do, but I really only like it in certain circumstances, and the overall container is a lot better for me. So I think one of the things we didn't cover is also understanding your strengths when it comes to email, because Ashley is amazing at writing email. Like, amazing. Like, if Ashley stops writing email, I think it would be a sacrifice and bad move in a business part. And so, like, one of her superpowers is actually being a relationship copywriter, right? Where she knows enough of the structure, but like if it's going to go design a customer journey, like I'd rather you write emails than design it. But I think for everybody listening, you also have to understand where your strength is, because there's going to be some of you listening that literally can think about a customer's journey over 90 days with sticky notes and be like, this is what I want them to do. And it's your superpower. And then there's going to be other ones of you like, I can't even think about that, but I can tell you what I would write to them every day and the stories I would tell. And I think one of the things that it took me the longest time to learn was not trying to be someone or something I'm not, and allowing me to play into my strengths. And so what I really was good at was the container, right? Like the journey, the 3, 5, 8, the escalation, the everything. And I was like, I don't want to be a conversion copywriter. I just want to talk to people. But that actually turned into one of my strengths, because I would just send an email of like what I would send to you. And then it started to work, but then it helped me hone my craft. But then I also realized that there's times that I want stories. I want, open loops and really good journeys that I can't write. So now I know that. And so I think it's important to play to your strengths.
Yep.
100%. And I'm going to say this because I just did an episode on this. Did you listen to the 89 million reasons to only use ConvertKit episode?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that one.
And so ConvertKit's what I use 99% of the time. And there's a few rare instances where I use ConvertKit and Klaviyo, but it's only for physical product e-commerce brands that require a visual presence once in a while. And so I use Klaviyo for some of the transactionals and then a visual presence, and I use ConvertKit for everything else. And so if you guys are wondering what I recommend, what Ashley recommends, go to useconvertkit.com, www.useconvertkit.com. But I did this whole episode on why you should use ConvertKit, and one of my favorite ones, and I think you would agree to this, one of my other favorite mistakes, and I say favorite because it's the easiest coachable point ever, my favorite mistakes that people make is they try to build everything themselves. Everything. Right? They'll design the journey and then they'll have the best emails and they'll spend 3 weeks trying to turn them on because they want to overcomplicate it or they're trying to learn something that's not their strength. And I get this message when, well, who's going to build it? And I was like, have you asked their support team yet?
Yep.
And I will tell you guys, mind blown, here's a secret. Nathan at ConvertKit is a friend of mine. I have no interest in that company. I have no vested interest. I am not an investor. I was one of the first 100 people using the platform. Because Nathan knew me before when he launched the platform. I've been using it since the day it came out. Like literally from the day it came out. And I have no vested interest. But here's the beautiful part. ConvertKit business only works if you can use email. So their customer service is incentivized to help you. And so there are still times to this day where I know that platform inside and out. And I'm like, hey guys, I can't figure this out. And they'll literally send me a Loom video and they'll be like, oh, we built it for you and here's how to do it next time. And so if you take what Ashley said earlier and you have the clarity of like, oh, this is what I want them to do. This is what's going to go in the email. These are my emails. And then you get them in. They'll help you get the tech pieces or you find somebody who's an expert that only takes 5 minutes. And so that's a really important one. Okay. I think we got it all. We'll have to do round 2 email. You down for a round 2 on email?
100%. I feel I could talk about email.
Okay, I feel like I didn't talk as much in the beginning, and then as we got fired up, I started talking more, and now I'm like ready to rip the curtains back on email. For those of you listening, if you want Ashley and I to do email round 2, tell us on social. So hit us up in our Facebook group, Relationships Beat Algorithms. She's in there, or tag us on social. Tell us that you want to do email number 2, and then tell us what you want us to talk about, because I have a feeling we'll spill the beans.
Yes, give us all the questions. I love questions.
And by the way, like I giggled, if you guys heard me giggling when Ashley was talking, because like I've known her for a while, so she says all the things that it makes me laugh, and she says holy guac all the time, which I love. And so those are the mannerisms that go in her emails. And by the way, for anybody who's like, oh, I want to see a good example, like you can sign up for my daily newsletter, which you've already heard about in other podcasts, but go check out Ashley's website. I will say this, and I'm going to give her kudos. She tricked me in the best way possible a couple months ago because I got an email in my inbox from her and I literally was like, God, we never talk on email. Why are you emailing me? We always talk on Facebook Messenger. And I literally opened the email and responded before I realized that you sent that email to your list.
Yeah, my best friend did the same thing.
I literally messaged Ashley and I was like, you biatch, in the best way. Like, you got me. And it wasn't tricky. It was literally like, it was the same message you would have sent me via Messenger, and you sent it via email, and I responded. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And so it takes a lot for me to respond. You got me good, so I want to give you kudos. So for everybody listening, because we're going to wrap right now, Ashley, make sure you guys check her out at ashleykdeluca.com. But if you could leave everybody with one thought, one takeaway, the last impression of Ashley K. DeLuca on this podcast, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, do it messy. Do it 100% messy, even if you have the toddler in the background, stealing your pen and trying to grab the potato chips off your desk. Just go for it. Like, regardless of what portion of it is in your business, whether it's email, whether it's just doing that Facebook Live, just do it messy and just, like, do it. You'll feel so much better and you'll come in so much more confident on the next round.
Oh, my God. I love it. I love it. The secret is to do it messy with avocados, turtles, coffee, and guacamole, which comes from avocados. So I think it's all encompassing. Thank you so much for being here. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Mind of George Show. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think we're going to do round 2 anyways, but please make sure you check out Ashley. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you review it, because I don't even know if I talk about that in the outro. And because I'm being consistent, I will see you in the next episode, or you will hear me in your earballs in the next episode. And remember that relationships will always beat algorithms. Now it's time to cue the outro. Bye.